This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. World leaders congratulate Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi after her party's supermajority win in Japan's snap election. But Beijing warns Tokyo against reckless moves and calls again for Ms. Takaichi to withdraw her remarks on Taiwan. Now, Ms. Takaichi's promises of more government spending propelling Japanese stocks to a record, the Nikkei crossing the 57,000 mark for the first time. Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai sentenced to 20 years under the territory's national security law for sedition and collusion with foreign forces. Beijing labels the verdict legitimate, while the UK calls for his release. And leader Kim Jong-un marks North Korea's 78th Armed Forces Day by calling for sweeping upgrades and greater firepower ahead of a major party congress this month. Also on the bulletin, seaweed farming has transformed coastal economies in Indonesia, but volatile prices and reliance on China could put farmers at risk. The Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi says that she feels a strong responsibility to make her country stronger and more prosperous. Her party's mandate has been greatly boosted by a landslide election victory and her power cemented as the country's first female premier. Now, Ms. Takaichi had earlier signaled a willingness to work with opposition parties.
私は柔軟性が取り柄です。ですから野党からの方々からいいご提案があったらしっかり受け止め、ただ財源は野党の方々探してくださらないので、その政策を実行するための財源も含めてしっかり考えたいと思ってます。
China, whose ties with Japan remain strained by Ms. Takaichi's earlier remarks on coming on Taiwan's defense, said that Beijing's policy towards Japan will not be changed by a particular election, but warned that any reckless actions by Tokyo would be met with what it calls a resolute response.
我们再次敦促日方撤回高市涉台错误言论，以实际行动展现维护中日关系政治基础的 基本诚意。日本极右翼势力若误判形势、恣意妄为，必将遭到日本人民的抵制和国际社会迎头痛击。
Sanae Takaichi's Liberal Democratic Party won a supermajority with 316 seats. That means more than two-thirds of the lower house. Its coalition partner, Japan Innovation Party, with 36 seats. And it was a poor showing for the newly formed main opposition Centrist Reform Alliance, winning only 49 seats. The party has expressed disappointment at the results, with its co-leaders announcing their resignations to take responsibility for the election defeat. A ruling coalition's win and its promises of more aggressive government spending, sending Japanese stocks to a record high. The Nikkei 225 surging more than 5% to cross 57,000 points this morning, now below that threshold, but still leading gains in the region. The topics also advancing to a record. Tech and machinery led the climb, with some chip gear makers rising more than 10%. Now, these are sectors seen benefiting from her strategic spending plans. Chip gear maker Advantest Corp was the biggest contributor to the topics, rising more than 11%. Defense manufacturers Kawasaki Heavy Industries and Ehai Corp also posting strong gains. For more market reactions, be sure to catch Roland Lim a little later on our bulletin. Right, for more on the snap election, our correspondent Michio Ishida joins us live now from Tokyo. Michio, following that landslide win, curious to know what are Ms. Takaichi's policy priorities with that strong mandate now?
Well, Mrs. Sanae Takaichi gave a news conference late this afternoon, and she said that her first and most important mission is to pass the huge financial year 2026 budget. Usually, the budget should be legislated by the end of March and go into effect in April. But as she called for a snap election, political watchers expect its Diet approval to be delayed. She said she called for a snap election to see whether or not the public supported her responsible, aggressive fiscal spending, stepping up security and intelligence. And with mandates, she said she will push through. And she mentioned about cutting sales tax of 8% on food products for 2 years while she prepared to implement a refundable tax credit, which she said takes time. Now, she mentioned she wished to accelerate discussion for the revision of the Constitution. With 2/3 majority in the lower house, she can pave the way for a needed referendum, but she does not have a majority in the upper house. And this will be a challenge for her. She talked about traveling to the U.S. for talks with Mr. Donald Trump, the president, to discuss a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, this is a concept introduced by her mentor, the late Shinzo Abe, 10 years ago. And she said she wanted to deepen the concept with Mr. Trump.
Now, let's talk about reactions out from China's foreign ministry today. What do they mean, you think, for China-Japan ties? And also, what's Ms. Takaichi's stance towards Beijing?
Well, Ms. Takaichi has not reacted to what China's been saying today. She stood by with the concept of a mutually beneficial strategic ties for stability. This mutual agreement was formed between Japan and China in 2006 between then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and President Hu Jintao. And she said, if there are issues of concerns between the two countries, it's important to address them, and she is open to dialogue. It's on the back of strained bilateral ties. As you know, China has been Japan's largest trading partner, but since her comment on a possible exercising of collective self-defense in the event of a Taiwan contingency in November in the Diet session, Beijing discouraged its citizens to visit Japan, citing safety risk and banned the export of materials that could be used for defense equipment.
And I want to talk about those key resignations, apparently. They've been announced by the opposition Centrist Reform Alliance, who did not do well at the election. What more do we know about those resignations?
Yes, well, the Centrist Reform Alliance was formed in haste in January. It was ahead of the snap election. Just as Ms. Takaichi's called for a snap election, which was seen as a gamble, the founding of CRA was too. Now, CRA was formed between the biggest opposition Constitutional Democrats and Komeito, which left the coalition with the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, in October. And CRA lost 123 seats in Sunday's election from 172 seats it held. And of course, the co-founders came under pressure to take responsibility for the poor result. And here's former Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda giving his comment.
私と斉藤共同代表から今回の歴史的な大敗の責任を取って辞任をさせていただきたいという趣旨のお話をさせていただきました。
Well, next, the party will elect its new leader in time for the resumption of parliament, which is expected to open later in the week or maybe next week. And it's to be seen if the party can rebuild itself from the devastating election defeat.
Right, many thanks for that report. Michio Ishida for CNA from Tokyo. And of course, we will be continuing this conversation. For more insights on how Prime Minister Takaichi could translate her election gains into fresh political momentum for her ruling party, we're going to be speaking with Special Advisor to the Fujitsu Future Studies Center, Tomohiko Taniguchi, a little later this hour. Now, Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years in jail in the city's most high-profile national security case. Chief Executive John Lee says the court sentence is deeply gratifying and upholds the rule of law. The 78-year-old founder of the now shuttered Apple Daily newspaper was convicted last December of colluding with foreign forces and publishing seditious articles. John Lee's comments were backed by the city's top police chief for national security, who defended the charges against Jimmy Lai. Beijing has also said that the case demonstrates judicial fairness.
香港是法治社会，特区司法机关依法履职尽责，维护法律权威，捍卫国家安全，合情、合理、合法，不容置喙。中央政府坚定支持特区依法维护国家安全，惩治危害国家安全的犯罪行为。
But critics have been quick to respond to the ruling. The UK voiced its support for Lai, seeking talks with Beijing on the case. Now, Oregon's US Senator Jeff Merkley, who is also a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has also called for his colleagues to pass a bill that would close Hong Kong's economic and trade offices in the US. Now, the offices act as a de facto diplomatic outposts for the city in Washington, New York, and San Francisco. For more, CNA's Deborah Wong, she joins us live from Hong Kong. So, Deborah, tell us some of the immediate reactions to Jimmy Lai's sentence.
So Mr. Lai was sentenced to 20 years of jail, and it's a sentence that the judges say has already taken into account his old age, his illnesses. They're saying that it's a combination of factors that will make prison life more burdensome than the other inmates. And so they've decided on that 20-year sentence. Now, supporters emerging from the court room after the session ended, some of them looked quite expressionless. Some do look quite crestfallen. We approached them and they said that they're all holding their sleeping bags, in fact, because they've been lining up for days just to catch a glimpse of Mr. Lai. And they told us that, the 20 years was actually akin to a life sentence because Mr. Lai is 78 years old. Mr. Lai's children, Claire and Sebastian Lai, also issued statements. They said that the sentence was a cruel and a heartbreaking one and a draconian one. And they also, I quote, say that Mr. Lai will eventually die as a martyr behind bars. On the flip side, we're seeing statements coming out from the Hong Kong authorities. Chief Executive John Lee, for instance, saying that the sentence demonstrates that the rule of law in Hong Kong is upheld and that justice is done. Mr. Lee also went on to say that Mr. Lai deserves a punishment for betraying the country and for inciting hatred. Now, Security Chief Chris Tang, once again in a press conference just half an hour ago, addressed the situation, addressed the narrative that press freedom is declining in Hong Kong. He says that the crux of the case really lies in Mr. Lai conspiring to collude with external forces, to incite hatred against the Chinese and Hong Kong governments. And he also said that Mr. Lai used journalism as a guise to harm China and Hong Kong, and that he says the city will next step up national security education because he says that risks are still present. Now, Hong Kong's National Security Police, shortly after the court session ended, they gave a press conference as well, and they told us that the sentencing was appropriate, but they will also be discussing with the Justice Department if they would intend to appeal that decision. Now, Mr. Lai himself also has 28 days to appeal the sentence if he wishes to do so.
And if we're talking about intervention, can we expect anything from the UK? How likely is it that Beijing will actually want to work with the British on Lai's case?
So just want to give you a breakdown of the UK statement. Now, UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says that the 20-year sentence is tantamount to a life sentence. And once again, the UK side urged the Chinese authorities and the Hong Kong authorities to release Mr. Lai on humanitarian grounds. Now, she went on to say that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had already raised the matter with President Xi Jinping in Beijing about 2 weeks ago, and that, there is a direct line to the Chinese government right now on this topic, and that the UK will rapidly engage with the government on this matter following the sentencing. Beijing so far has emphasized the same line they've always been talking about. They say that this judicial case is a domestic affair, and they warn against foreign interference. Have a listen.
我首先要指出的是，黎智英是中国公民。黎智英是一系列反中乱港事件的主要策划者和参与者，其行为严重冲击一国两制的原则底线，严重危害国家安全，严重损害 香港的繁荣稳定和市民的福祉，理应受到法律的严惩。
So it's unclear how UK intends, as they say, to rapidly engage with China on this matter going forward when the red line, as you've heard in the statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the red line has been drawn quite clearly. We know that both countries have agreed to address trade priorities first, in the bilateral talks in Beijing. We saw agreements to collaborate on green technology. We saw investment deals and also reduction in tariffs. So the UK government, saying that they have arrived at these priorities, trying to balance national security concerns with China, aiming for consistent pragmatic partnership with China. So in this context, with trade deals at stake and both sides quite keen to see stability in an otherwise quite disruptive global trade environment, it's not clear at this point just how much Mr. Lai's case will impede progress or will affect warming tides going forward. Otelli.
All right, many thanks for that report. CNA's Deborah Wong speaking to us from Hong Kong. The time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, will Sanae Takaichi's big election win give her free rein to spend boldly? Or will jittery investors rein her in? We ask an expert.
In the world of trade, it helps to be part of a network.
Well, not just any network. UOB's network.
The most extensive network in ASEAN.
Through this network, you can connect directly to my business.
And mine.
And mine.
And mine!
With this network, you can source for supplies big
and small across supply chains.
And connect to sector specialists through 500 UOB offices globally.
With access to an end-to-end platform that syncs up your entire value chain.
For a complete view of your trade and cash position across borders on one single interface.
And that's what makes UOB the one bank for ASEAN.
It's where the region's most extensive trade network meets a truly integrated supply chain platform. And there's just one more thing to say. Be part of ASEAN's most extensive trade network.
The fourth industrial revolution is here, and AI could determine who gets ahead and who is left behind.
AI is very much a first world technology, making some of the richest companies in the world even richer.
Why is it hard for developing countries like Cambodia to close the gap?
Most farmers are not comfortable with AI chatbot or the text-based system.
We need AI developers, we need AI programmers, computer scientists, engineers.
And what's at stake if they cannot? Insight, Thursday on CNA.
Our oceans are changing faster than ever.
Loss of biodiversity, increased pollution. It's not a good picture.
An oceanarium like ours bridges this gap between passive awareness and real-world action.
To remain credible over the long term, they have to go beyond the current standards.
What role can a modern oceanarium play? Watch Oceans of Change, Friday on CNA.
In support of marine conservation, brought to you by Singapore Oceanarium and Resorts World Sentosa.
Saturday on Japan Hour, cycle to Mie and meet the amazing locals. An artisan who makes the most creative crafts. A veteran ama diver. And a woman who does home deliveries to the locals. Japan Hour, Saturday on CMA.
Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation. MUFG, committed to empowering a brighter future. Zip Air, no fuel surcharge from 216 Singapore dollars. And IHI.
Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is now time for your business update with Roland Lim. So, Roland, big question is, how are the markets in Japan reacting to Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's major win at the polls?
Yes, Oteli, yeah. The landslide victory triggering the so-called Takaichi trade. Investors see her push for more government spending as good for Japanese equities, though it doesn't bode well for the yen or government bonds. The Nikkei 225 jumping to an all-time high of above 57,000 earlier in the session, but the traders paired off those gains to close 56,363 up. Meantime, though, the Topix also hitting record highs. It is up 3,783, up 2.3% for the day. Japanese stocks projected to extend their rally with hopes of bigger spending on defense, artificial intelligence, and semiconductors. The challenge now is maintaining that confidence as Ms. Takaichi struck a cautious tone in her first comments after the election, saying fiscal policy needs to be sustainable. Her earlier promise to cut sales tax on foods and bond yields to once unthinkable levels, 30-year JGB yields hitting an all-time high when she called a snap election last month, as investors grew concerned over who foots the bill for her reform agenda. But bond markets stayed relatively calm after last night's win, a sign that investors are willing to give Ms. Takaichi the benefit of the doubt, betting that her supermajority will allow for more restraint in government spending. The yen is also vulnerable. The currency has already lost about 6% against the greenback since Ms. Takaichi won the LDP election in October and subsequently became prime minister. It has also plunged to record lows against other major currencies such as the euro and the Swiss franc. But the yen strengthening by as much as 0.6% today against the greenback, moving further away from the 160 per dollar zone that had prompted authorities to intervene previously. Well, to get more insights on the market movements of the landslide elections, we are joined by Takuji Okubo, who is Managing Director at Japan Macro Systems. Takuji-san, thank you for joining us on this show. This two-thirds mandate, has this given the green light, do you think, for bold fiscal spending, or will the bond yields actually put the brakes on her moves?
So the landslide victory certainly gives Takaichi a large, political mandate to do what she prioritizes. But we need to think about, okay, what is actually the priority of Prime Minister Takaichi? And on that front, I would say she's a nationalist security hawk first, and economist maybe third or fourth. So I don't think Takaichi will pursue any form of aggressive fiscal loosening. But I think her priority, as she actually commented in the press conference she did 1 hour ago, I think her priority is more military spending, more economic security, and biggest dream of her will be the constitutional change.
As you mentioned, the super long JGBs dipped during the election run-up and then has steadied after the election results. Was that, do you think, tacit approval for her smart stimulus package? Are you convinced?
So I think, yes, Japanese bond yield has risen in the past 3 months, but I would attribute that more to market perceptions change on what Bank of Japan will do. So I would say a year ago, market consensus was that the Bank of Japan will raise its policy rate to 1% and basically stop there. But now I think that perception has changed. That terminal rate has risen to 1.5%. So, I mean, if the market is really concerned about the fiscal sustainability, we would see a much larger rise at the long end, 30-year, 40-year yield. But where the bond yield actually risen by far is actually the 10-year yield. So I think the rise in the bond yield is more a reflection of a monetary policy rather than a fiscal policy.
What's your viewpoint on the yields, 10-year and 40 years? What auction would be the tipping point in terms of supporting where yields should be at this point in time?
Right. So in my view, actually 30-year at 3.8% is actually fairly high. Japanese pension fund generally target 2.5%, 3% for their annual return rate. So 30-year bond, 40-year bond pretty much gives them a very safe investment strategy. So I think so we haven't seen much investment from Japanese investors into bonds. But I think they were actually waiting for the best opportunity to start investing in. I think they're actually Japanese institutional money, long-term institutional money, are generally happy with the current level. So I don't think Japanese bond yield would at the 30-year yield would rise much because of a fiscal concern. I mean, it could rise because of actually fiscal concern in US. But not in Japan.
Yes, I was just about to mention, I mean, okay, so yields are probably not going to rise, but they are on an upward trajectory, and that's certainly going to have a ripple effect globally. I'm talking about impacts on bonds, on forex flows, even Asian currencies. What becomes then of the yen carry trade?
So I think, so with bond yield giving fairly attractive yield for Japanese institutional money, if there's anything, I think we will actually see a reversal of carry trade, and especially I think there's a concern of what the next Federal Reserve Chair would do in US, and I think there's a concern, a genuine concern at the longer end. So I think there could be a repatriation of Japan carry trade, Japanese money, going into US Treasury, European bonds, could actually return to Japanese financial market.
What then is your yen outlook? Weaker still, or are we going to be able to see intervention looming at 156 to the dollar?
So, well, Prime Minister Takaichi is definitely not pursuing aggressive yen strengthening policy. I think she would probably prefer more or less status quo. So, but I think in general, the chances are we are likely to see kind of gradual yen appreciation rather than depreciation.
Okay, but you're not going to commit to a level. Takuchi-san, thank you for those insights. That was Takuchi Okubo, who is Managing Director at Japan Macro Advisors. The rest of East Asian markets also getting a boost from Japan's positive trade and U.S. chips tracking higher the previous session. Investors have been snapping up, beaten down names on expectations that they would benefit from increased spending on AI data centers. In Seoul, the Kospi snapping two-day losing streak thanks to U.S. semiconductor closing high on Friday. Heavyweight Samsung Electronics up by 5.23%, getting a boost after the report on mass production of its AI chips. Taiwan weighted index also having its best showing since January. Greater China markets also following the positive trend as sentiment towards global risk assets eased. The Shanghai Composite also up since its best day in January. Shenzhen, the second bourse, is up 2.17%. And Hong Kong is hitting its one-week high at 27,027 points. And that'll do it for business.
Thanks so very much, Roland. All right, coming up on East Asia tonight, an election gamble that has paid off big time for Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. What can we expect with a much stronger hand to reshape the country's economic and foreign policies? Well, we'll be getting expert insights after this break.
The weather brought to you by Nippon Paint.
Washable, anti-mold, durable, strong coverage. Nippon Paint Odorless, Singapore's most popular paint brand.
How do you stretch 1 month's pay across a whole year? He had $70,000 of debt, but he paid it off in 7 months. Plus, would you trade a stable paycheck for freedom?
我赚的少，我也很开心，因为我是完全自由意志。
Money Mind, Wednesday on CNA.
This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we are following. A Hong Kong court sentences media tycoon Jimmy Lai to 20 years in jail following his conviction under the city's national security law in a case drawing widespread global scrutiny. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un calls for an upgrade to the country's military and a broadening of its powers ahead of a major party congress planned for this month. And Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi secures a landslide election victory, her Liberal Democratic Party winning a supermajority in parliament, strengthening her mandate and cementing power as the nation's first female premier. Several leaders have congratulated Ms. Takaichi on her win, among them U.S. President Donald Trump. He called her a highly respected and very popular leader in a Truth Social post, and he wished the Prime Minister great success in passing what he described as a conservative peace through strength agenda. Now, earlier, Ms. Takaichi had thanked the U.S. leader for his endorsement. The Prime Minister vowed to strengthen ties with Washington in a post on X, and she said that U.S.-Japan relations are built on deep trust and close cooperation, and that the potential of that alliance is limitless. Now, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung also sent his congratulations to Prime Minister Takaichi, wishing Japan continued success under her leadership. As for Taiwanese President William Lai, well, he has called for Ms. Takaichi's victory to bring a more prosperous and secure future for Japan, as well as its partners in the region. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has also congratulated his Japanese counterpart, Sanae Takaichi, on her win in Sunday's snap election. Citing Japan and Singapore's 60 years of diplomatic ties, Prime Minister Wong says that the two countries enjoy a substantive and long-standing partnership. He adds that he looks forward to working closely with Ms. Takaichi to enhance cooperation in both traditional and emerging areas, such as the green transition and digitalization. PM Wong adds that both countries share a commitment to uphold the rules-based international order, multilateralism and free trade. He adds that Singapore looks forward to deepening Japan's cooperation with ASEAN to foster regional peace and prosperity. For more on this, let's bring in Tomohiko Taniguchi, Special Advisor, Fujitsu Future Studies Center, and also former Special Advisor to the late Prime Minister Abe. Well, thanks for joining us once again, Professor. First up, I just thought I'd get your personal thoughts on the Prime Minister, because you personally know her, and you have said earlier that she has transformed to a remarkable degree. Perhaps you could just tell us a bit more about that.
Many people have known her to be a diligent, hard worker, delving into policy documents one after another every night, every day. But very few people actually anticipated that she would wield this much leadership caliber once in office. And that's exactly the kind of natural talent that she's exhibiting. When she met Donald J. Trump, when she met Italian Prime Minister, when she played the drum sets together with South Korean President, decisive, determined, and not wavering. That's the sort of perception that voters came to realize, and they cast their votes to endorse that decisive nature.
And if we talk about reactions, I want to first touch on what China said. Basically, they in the foreign ministry's response was that they said there's deeper structural problems and the ideological shifts reflected in the vote should not be ignored. What do you think they're really trying to label the problem here, Professor?
Actually, it's not that much because it is coming from a foreign ministry official. What matters more than anything else is what President Xi himself is thinking about. If what's happened in the future is any guide, President Xi substantially mellowed to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe only after Prime Minister Abe succeeded in building his own electoral capital, political capital, and diplomatic capital by securing better than average relationships with both Obama and Trump. So Xi Jinping favors strength, favors power, and Prime Minister Takaichi is fitting into that category. So I would imagine that the bilateral relationship between China and Japan, to be more precise, bilateral relation between these two individuals will be better than it is now.
Well, that is an optimistic picture, and of course, you've seen how this plays out up close in the Abe years. So, from that experience, I mean, what do you think it actually means to stand up to Beijing? Because I'm trying to, get an understanding of how do you figure out what's the line between, projecting toughness and yet being flexible, which is what Prime Minister Takaichi has said that she will try to a certain degree.
First, there is no such thing as election calendar in the PRC. And President Xi always looks at democratic systems inferior because every once in a while, Prime Minister, President, leaders must change. So the first priority that Ms. Takaichi should look carefully at is how to extend her term in office by passing important legislative bills one after another, and by winning national level election over and over again. The next election, due July 2025 for the upper house election, is crucial. Only by securing supermajority there, Prime Minister Takaichi, if she so wishes, could pursue constitutional amendment.
So, the bigger question here is also what this does beyond Japan's borders. And if we zoom out, do you see Ms. Takaichi's victory as a genuine game changer when it comes to the Indo-Pacific security?
Game changer or not, but Ms. Takaichi must show to your Prime Minister or other leaders in the ASEAN region that she is here and she will stay, and she will pursue the kind of things that she has pledged that she would pursue. So that sort of trust, credibility, and faith is very much important for her to become a decisive leader across the region. I think the region needs to strike a very good balance between this very powerful individual, Xi Jinping, and someone else. And Prime Minister Takaichi could become that someone else.
Interesting. And Laura, let's talk about the fact that, there's a lot of talk about her visiting Washington in March. We keep hearing this limitless alliance potential. But Professor, I mean, in the real world, what do you think when they meet? What's Washington going to be asking for, and what is Tokyo on their side hoping to get in return?
Once again, Prime Minister Takaichi must market herself very well to President Donald J. Trump, who is known to be very much transactional. And once again, she must tell him that she is the best possible partner for the United States president to work with now and going forward. So that's the most important thing that Prime Minister Takaichi should tell Donald Trump. Otherwise, two countries are already bound by the promises and treaties and pledges that have been made over the last 2-3 years when it comes to investment, when it comes to trade, tariffs, and so on and so forth. Prime Minister Takaichi may be interested in proposing joint projects in the areas of scientific research, in the areas of critical minerals, joint explorations, in the areas of nuclear fusion, and so on and so forth. By so doing, they, Trump, Takaichi, could hoist a banner that here are two big democratic allies that are also pursuing scientific cutting-edge projects.
So, of course, a mandate this big comes with a clock on it, and everyone is seeing what she can deliver. I know you've touched on a bunch of things that Takaichi needs to do, but in terms of what does she have to prove herself first to voters at home and to partners abroad, if you could just sum that up, because she does have a lot to live up to.
Yes. The nation is right in the middle of the parliamentary session that began in January and then will end sometime in June. So that's the biggest window of opportunity for the incumbent administration to push through some of the important legislative bills. What's interesting to see is whether or not Takaichi is going to propose a bill to create Japan's own intelligence nerve center, which Prime Minister Takaichi has been very much keen on building. That's a hardcore issue. The nation, ordinary folks, may be interested in bread and butter issues. So making a very good balance between those hardcore and bread and butter issues takes a sort of statesmanship, communicative skills. So first and foremost, Prime Minister Takaichi, with her own strong mandate, must communicate very well first to the nation's citizens and to the outer world.
Well, plenty to watch out for. Thanks again, Professor, for joining us, helping us map out what is next. Tomohiko Taniguchi, Special Advisor from Fujitsu Future Studies Center and also former Special Advisor to the late Prime Minister Abe. Well, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Tokyo Electric Power Company restarts a nuclear reactor at a central Japan facility more than 2 weeks after an alarm halted a planned move. Plus,
I'm Chandni Vatwani in South Sulawesi. I'll have all the details on the largest seaweed-producing province in Indonesia.
A group described as a suspected China Nexus espionage actor being blamed for an attack on all four.
Change is unfolding quietly in how we love, in how we think, and even in how we move. This February on CNA, from an unmarked office in New Delhi, a team of sleuths are hired by anxious parents to conduct a unique kind of investigation, vetting potential brides and grooms.
आपके पास में कोई रहते हैं, उन्होंने लोन लिया है, तो उसके बारे में थोड़ा डिटेल्स चाहिए था मुझे.
Marriage, espionage, and protective parenting collide in the world of the love auditors. As artificial intelligence gets even more pervasive, fundamental questions are being asked. Where does AI's greatest potential truly lie? And where do humans still hold the advantage?
AI is not telling them the full answer.
but how they can improve.
In raising expectations.
Mutton! Yes, Mutton. He just turned on my massage seats!
What happens when you put the muttons in a car without drivers? The pair of jocks step from behind the mics to have a hands-free adventure in autonomous vehicles, where they experience the highs that AVs can go to in Who's Driving Now? This February on CNA.
So it's a long needle, it's an awake patient, the patient might move, the surgeon might move excessively, involuntarily. So this is where AI really shines.
Hi, Rohit. I don't speak Mandarin, but my spectacles can translate.
The AI is not telling them the full answer, but how they can improve. Where is it missing?
AI is no longer a tool we merely use. It's a presence we live with. Talking to second me is like talking to themselves, like a mirror to reflect who they are. It's in our pockets, our cities, our conversations.
Welcome to Wild Organic.
Well, hello there to your new friend. He's got a really welcoming vibe.
It speaks our language, reads our world, and reshapes the lenses through which we see everything.
It's not a fish, it's a drawing of a fish.
It's a drawing of a fish, so it's quite precise. This change is unprecedented in pace, breadth, and depth. And it forces us to ask, can AI think? Does it break barriers or build new ones? Can AI heal the world? What happens to truth, trust, and agency? Join me as I explore how our futures are being rewritten in real time. Raising Expectations, Sunday to Wednesday on CNA.
A group described as a suspected China Nexus espionage actor is being blamed for an attack on all 4 of Singapore's telco operators. UNC 3886 is the cyber threat group the Singapore government named in July last year. 6 agencies mounted a cyber response in the wake of the attack, and investigations found no evidence that services were disrupted or sensitive data lost. Our Digital Development and Information Minister, Josephine Teo, called on all critical information infrastructure operators to keep investing in cybersecurity.
You are at the front lines of the battle against cyber threat actors. Your actions or inaction can determine whether we succeed or fail in protecting our critical infrastructure and our national security. Leaders, including at the board and management levels, must also take cybersecurity seriously and provide close oversight to their teams.
While authorities did not reveal when the attacks began, they mounted Singapore's largest coordinated cyber response in March last year. 6 agencies were activated and worked closely with the telcos to counter the threat. Ivy Chok takes us through what happened.
Deep in service, an alarm was set off. Cyber threat group UNC 3886 had sneaked in using what's called a zero-day exploit. This means targeting a hidden flaw that developers are unaware of, like a secret entrance to your home that you don't know about. When telcos discovered this breach, they immediately alerted the authorities, who sprang into action.
The first step is to do a triage as well as to assess the possible scope of the incident. So it was only after this process was completed that we realized the possible scale of incident that we had in front of us.
Flash forward to March 2025, months after the group first infiltrated the telcos. Emergency cyber response protocols were activated and CSA launched the biggest coordinated cyber response in Singapore to date, called Operation Cyber Guardian. The multi-agency effort mobilized over 100 defenders across 6 organizations from both the civil and military sectors. Working round the clock, the teams tracked the attackers' movements, and at the same time, they alerted operators of critical information infrastructures. They provide essential services that Singaporeans can't live without. In July 2025, the public was informed.
UNC 3886 poses a serious threat to us and has the potential to undermine our national security. Even as we speak, UNC 3886 is attacking our critical infrastructure.
To counter the attack, defenders cast a range of actions. This includes combing through networks to close access points and change credentials. As infected systems were cleaned up, they were also redesigned and hardened against future strikes. Defenders also simulated attacks and fixed gaps to ensure that measures were working properly. But UNC 3886 fought back. Like a chameleon changing colors, it switched gears and used different techniques to evade detection. Defenders doubled down in response, adapting to the attackers' evolving tactics.
We first study the network of the affected CI, and that's where we develop our custom tools, scanners, as well as fine-tune our network detections so that we can hunt for signs and trails that the threat actors left behind when they compromise the network.
For containment, we raise the securities of the telco operators and close off the already known compromised segment. And we also identify previously unknown vulnerabilities and close this off as well. So for remediations, so even in the midst of taking steps to contain the breach, we actually work with other agencies to determine the impact and identify the root cause of the incidents in order to prevent reoccurrence of the incident.
With these efforts, the team managed to limit the attackers' activities.
So far, our attackers have not been able to move deeper into our telco networks. In one instance, they were able to gain access to a few critical systems, but did not get far enough to have been able to disrupt services.
Even as the attacks are contained, authorities warn that cyber threat groups remain sophisticated and persistent. Efforts to defend Singapore's cybersecurity are ongoing.
A North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, has called for the country's military to be upgraded and its power broadened over the coming years. That's according to state media KRT. The nation's leader made the remarks during a visit to the Ministry of Defense yesterday, marking the 78th founding anniversary of the nation's armed forces. The comments come ahead of plans for the country's 9th Congress to be held in Pyongyang later this month. The event is one of North Korea's biggest political gatherings, where Kim is expected to announce his domestic and foreign policies for the next 5 years. North Korea and its 2021 Party Congress vowed to develop military tech, including spy satellites, solid-fuel ballistic missiles, and submarines powered by nuclear propulsion. Japan has restarted a reactor at the world's largest nuclear power plant after an attempt last month was suspended due to a minor alarm glitch. Well, that incident put a pause on the first ever start of the Kashiwazaki Kariwa plant since the Fukushima disaster back in 2011. Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, says the facility in Japan's Nagata region was switched back on at 2 p.m. local time. TEPCO says it has changed the alarm's settings as the reactor is safe to operate, adding that it will continue checking the equipment to make sure systems are working as required. The plant had been inactive since Japan halted the use of nuclear power following an earthquake and tsunami in 2011, which sent the Fukushima atomic plant into meltdown. But now Tokyo is looking towards atomic energy to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who won a landslide election victory yesterday, has emphasized the significance of nuclear power for the nation's energy self-sufficiency. Now, seaweed is one of Indonesia's leading commodities. The booming industry has transformed the lives of many small-scale farmers, and authorities are now pushing to move beyond raw exports. CNA's Chatni Vatvani files this report from South Sulawesi, Indonesia's top seaweed-producing province.
It's harvest season, and 37-year-old Salmawati is going out to sea for her daily collection of seaweed. She's one of the lucky ones, having secured her spot for cultivation just 50 meters from the shore. Salmawati is among 3,000 residents of Punaga village in South Sulawesi, where most livelihoods depend on the sea.
Tahun 2000, Bapak itu kan petani juga, petani rumput laut juga. Tapi harga dulu itu kan masih sangat murah. Dibanding sekarang itu, makanya petani itu di sini rata-rata pekerjaan rumput laut karena perekonomiannya sangat berubah.
Indeed, cultivating seaweed has transformed the lives of many in this village.
Masyarakat sebelumnya masih mempunyai rumah-rumah yang kumuh, tapi dengan adanya budidaya rumput laut ini yang begitu luar biasa, alhamdulillah banyak masyarakat kami yang sudah mempunyai rumah yang begitu indah, bagus, sudah permanen, rumah batu. Bahkan ada beberapa yang sudah dapat membeli kendaraan roda 4, ada yang membeli mobil, dan itu banyak, itu sudah puluhan.
Cultivation here is laborious. A good season can see 10 kilos of seedlings producing 70 kilos of seaweed. But a poor season may only churn out as little as 3 kilos.
Attaching the seedlings onto a cultivation rope like this can take hours or days. Here, it takes 10 hours to attach 1 ton of seedlings.
Seeded ropes are suspended from floats anchored in the water, creating a vertical farm that maximizes space. In 2024, Indonesia produced 10.8 million tons of seaweed, with more than 4 million tons coming from South Sulawesi alone. NC Jaya links small producers with larger markets and industries. And as the middleman, he even provides farmers with funds to buy seedlings for cultivation. Seedlings are 30 cents a kilo, and the going rate for a kilo of seaweed is $1.30. But while supply is abundant, prices are unstable and heavily depend on global demand.
3 tahun yang lalu itu, kata bos lah di bawah kan, ada 7 negara yang minta, dan itu pun pengirimannya langsung keluar. Kalau sekarang hanya China.
China is Indonesia's top seaweed buyer, so much so that one of China's largest seaweed processing companies, BLG, opened a factory in South Sulawesi. Local authorities say the goal is for Indonesia to process its own seaweed.
Jadi selama ini kalau dengan raw material itu kan selalu ya kita tidak ada added value-nya. Nah, kalau kita bisa olah sendiri, termasuk yang keragenan itu sampai kepada industri untuk farmasinya, kemudian untuk kebutuhan-kebutuhan yang lain, saya kira itu akan memberikan added value bagi Sulsel.
Efforts are underway to enhance sustainability, with the aim to move beyond raw exports and build a fully integrated seaweed sector. Chani Vatmani, CNA, South Sulawesi, Indonesia.
And still ahead on Asia tonight, here are some of the stories we're also going to be covering. Thailand, like Japan, also went to the polls yesterday. The nation's Bumjai Thai party is preparing for coalition talks after taking the lead in the election, with Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul declaring a victory. Plus, Israel's President Isaac Herzog visits Sydney, aiming to show support for Australia's Jewish community following December's Bondi Beach terror attack. And these stories and more on Asia tonight, 8 p.m. Singapore-Hong Kong time, right here on CNA. And that wraps up Monday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.